Hello, podcast people. This is estate planning and asset protection attorney Leslie Marenco bringing you another episode of Having Fun with Death and Taxes. Today, I am joined by Manuel Rodriguez, one of our esteemed fiduciary litigation attorneys, the great honorable, we joke around here in the office, he is the great honorable curator, personal representative, trustee, and litigator. And those are all the roles.
Wear a lot of hats.
You wear a lot of hats here. And actually, you've also served as nominee manager for people that need someone else to serve in a fiduciary capacity for their company, actually. So, Manny, if you'd like to give our lovely podcast audience any other introduction to yourself, or...
I am a litigation attorney. I've spent most, if not all, of my career doing commercial, estate, fiduciary litigation.
And you also come at it from, you used to be a CPA.
Absolutely.
And a forensic accountant.
I have an extensive background in forensics, public accounting, worked at Arthur Andersen, so it is a complex career. It is a varied career. So I can bring a lot to the table, so hopefully this discussion will be interesting and provocative, and we'll add something different and unique to this perspective.
So today we're going to be talking about singer-songwriter Tom Petty, which I don't know too much about Tom Petty. I feel like that might be a little more your era.
I do know a little
than
bit
my
about Tom
era,
Petty.
as far as like his musical career or what songs he has. He might have been towards the end of his career by the time I started listening to pop music or whatever. But it seems like, sadly, Tom definitely succumbed to, I guess, one of these rock star cliches these days, which is he died of an overdose. And at 66, so he's relatively young, right? They all do, exactly.
They all do.
So many people that we talk about on this podcast actually have died in the same way. But so the autopsy found, my God, fentanyl, oxy, Xanax, alcohol, and plenty of other prescription medications in his system. And as far as like how much he was worth, we don't actually have any good source, and we talk about sources in episode 1 of this podcast, so don't come at me. But we know that it was at least worth because of the ongoing value of the intellectual property, of the music, of how it's going to be licensed, et cetera, that we're looking around in the $100 million range. Regardless of what it was worth at that point in time, you're looking at a long-term value, and certainly the IRS would agree with me. And we'll talk about valuations and stuff on the Michael Jackson podcast. But so we're looking at about $100 million over some course of the next decade. So he was initially married to his high school sweetheart, get cute, for 24 years. And they had 2 kids, and the kids are very important for the purposes of this podcast. We have Adria, and we have Anna Kim, okay? And then they got a divorce, of course. So we have blended family situation here, as we also is the common denominator in our podcast when we're talking about litigation. And then he remarried to Dana York, and they were married for over 10 years by the time he died. So that is the composition of the family. And for sure in estate litigation, Manny, we always talk about how blended families, imagine, if normal families have their own issues and their own dynamic, blended family just bring a whole nother psychology to the mix.
Blended families, inevitably, especially wealthy blended families,
Yes.
spawn a tremendous amount of this sort of post-death litigation because of the nature of the family dynamics and the fact that the children from the first and initial marriages are often at odds with the successor spouses. And that's just
the name of the game.
That's just a tried and true formula, unfortunately, in our world.
It is. And I mean, we might talk about the U-Haul family drama on this podcast. And if you could believe, I think that family, there's 12 children and 4 wives. So I was like, I think he wins. I think Mr. Schoen wins that prize, whatever it is, of how many times you get married and have more blended and more blended. So here we only have the children from the prior marriage. At least we don't have any new children, but we do have surviving spouse. And there was an estate plan, which is also something that sometimes we don't, whether it's the Prince estate or whatever. There's not always any estate plan. So here we did have an estate plan, and you saw it. It was like an 80-page trust or whatever, right? And
80 pages of
80
material.
pages of clauses and...
So you would think 80 pages would be ironclad, well-defined, and extremely measurable.
Sure.
But you'd be wrong.
You would be very mistaken.
You'd be wrong.
You would be very mistaken. And I thought what was interesting is he made surviving spouse the sole trustee of that trust. But inside of that trust, he actually said, which I thought was interesting, because it was like, create this entity after I die, trustee, to hold my music catalog and everything that's going to happen in that music catalog. So that wasn't set up before he died. It was an instruction to the trustee to do that. And then he said, and I quote, that he wanted his daughters to be entitled to participate equally in the decisions regarding that catalog. And herein...
Those were the exact words.
Those were the exact words. And we have copy-pasted it out of this 80-page trust. But we'll talk a lot more about that. I mean, essentially, what we're going to be fighting over is not even distribution.
No.
Because a lot of times people are fighting over, hey, whatever, they were under undue duress, or they were incapacitated and they left you more than me, or I was cut out, or whatever it is. But here we're not fighting over distribution. We're fighting over control. We're fighting over who's going to control.
So here, what was incredibly valuable wasn't Tom Petty's actual asset value at the time of death, but his future catalog rights, which could be literally in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
And that's what everyone really fights over. Not the home, the estate house.
In the Palisades.
In the suburbs of any state USA. That's not what they're fighting over. They're fighting over the future catalog rights that are oftentimes, in the case of a guy like Tom Petty, there's a 30, 40, 50-year catalog estate that could literally total hundreds of millions of dollars in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Elvis is worth more now dead than he ever was in life. And so is Michael Jackson. And I think that's a point that few people really understand, because they think it's their big house on the corner. Nope, honestly,
right.
Nobody really
it's
cares.
Neverland Ranch.
Nobody
No.
cares about Neverland. Neverland has had 6 owners since Michael Jackson owned it. It's the future catalog rights to those songs that are literally worth hundreds, not tens, but hundreds of millions of dollars in future value. In the case of Tom Petty, he had a huge song in the early 2000s called Free Fallin'.
Oh, I know that song.
Free Fallin'. Well, that's what he left.
Know that song.
That's what he left these folks. He left them free fallin'.
And I'm assuming amongst many, many other songs. Because when did he become famous? It wasn't in 2000.
Tom Petty
right?
became famous
right.
in the 80s.
Sure.
In the
like
80s.
before, before my time.
So
by the time Free Fallin' comes out, I'm just like, oh, some old guy with one-hit wonder here. But obviously not. He had many hit wonders. I just don't know about them.
He had dozens of hits in many different band configurations.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He was a huge star.
But he had different bands.
He had different bands
so
and he played with different people.
Oh, all right.
But he had a substantial catalog, and I think it is. I think it's kind of, I don't know, ironic or interesting. His last huge hit was Free Fallin', which is exactly what he left these folks doing, based on the way that this trust was written.
So, I mean, back to that, because I think the first lesson here is definitely that, what you write matters with the preciseness and the specificity. At the end of the day, a trust is nothing but a very complicated contract. And I say very complicated in the sense that there's tax shit happening inside of a trust and different split offs of things. And I mean, there's just all sorts of, it's at the intersection of many different areas of law. It's going to deal with real estate. It tells you to open up a corporation and park the IP rights, right? And assign them into some company. And so your trust is a very complex contract. And before, I guess, everyone starts laughing, or on this podcast, we say non-lawyers are civilians. So before the civilians roll their eyes and go, oh, these lawyers even want to argue about what equal means, right? Like we're the vultures that'll find any bullshit to argue about. I mean, I'm here to say absolutely equal is something to argue about. And there is actually a certain case in this office that's been going on for about 5 years that you initially mediated back in 2019, if you will recall, where now at distribution, we're having let's say a hell of a time explaining to a judge why the final distribution is not going to be equal, because certain people were paid at certain times, not because we wanted it that way, because it had to be that way, and all sorts of shit. So now we're sitting here going, Judge, the distribution is not going to be a third to the other estates and our client. Actually, it's this other distribution because we need it to be global, a third, not acute, a third right now. So absolutely, ladies and gentlemen, equal is something for sure that we will argue about. And in this case, it's a little different. Because it should have been drafted maybe in another way. It should have been more specific. They should have taken a little bit more time to describe how this company is going to be set up and what the voting was going to be. But for sure, let's say lesson number one, we need specific language. We need to describe things. Your lawyer needs to really dig into what that's going to look like.
I mean, I find it, I don't know what the word is, but I find it almost ironic that they build an 80-page document that fails to define the most basic foundational building block of how control over all of those assets, past and future, are governed, which is the voting rights for that particular trust. And the voting rights are fundamental because they control the how that trust is ultimately manipulated and governed, but they fail to define that very basic term. But yet they spent 80 pages with everything else. So I'm actually I don't know, a little bit flabbergasted that someone would spend 80 pages but yet not understand that their inability to define the words equal participation have led to years of litigation. As a litigation attorney, it just seems so obvious that failure would spawn $1 million or more in fees.
Oh, for sure.
So
for sure, on each side.
On each
right?
side.
So the children are trying to say equal means I get one vote, my sister gets one vote, and then, that woman over there that my dad decided to shack up with for 10 years gets a vote. And what surviving spouse is trying to say is, equal really means them and me. Because it will never be equal. Like, we can't stand each other. So
is it a 50-50
clearly,
or a 2/3, 1/3?
Right. And that is ultimately what everybody is fighting for, because it greatly changes all control. I mean, the reality is there is no middle ground here. Either it's 66% or it's 50%. And I mean, I've been accused on this podcast more than once, Manny, of saying that I'm a little partial to surviving spouse. I've even been accused of being biased towards surviving spouse. That may or may not be true.
And see, my bias is the opposite.
Well, interesting.
My bias is the opposite. I think the children, those born of chromosomes, actually have, in my opinion, a more severe biological right than a new spouse.
How civil law of you. How Well, that's good. That's good. We're taking opposing here, because one of the things I really loved about surviving spouse's position was she was always trying to say, look, I mean, in these petitions and whatever, I want this guy appointed as the manager. Ultimately, these two are batshit crazy. I'm not a IP agent, lawyer, whatever. This was not my chosen career. Let's appoint this guy that knows, and I believe it was like Larry somebody or another, right? That knows what the fuck he's doing. He's going to make the most use of all of the media rights and re-releasing the free-falling album, whatever the fuck,
catalog.
Right? And there's even a fight about the artwork somewhere around here. Album.
Oh, I did.
So, I mean, it's a 335-page complaint. It is absolutely obscene, is what I mean. Half of the fights between every lawyer, with redacted, it's such a shit show. It is such a shit show. It's fantastic. I recommend everybody Google, this petition in California, because it is quite entertaining. But I actually thought and of course the kids are like, no, that's clearly just her best friend. That guy, right? We can do this ourselves. But I thought that was at least a smart way to go. Look, not me and not these two are really apt to do this. I mean, there are many very professional people who manage, superstars' careers and their albums and how that gets distributed and whatever it is, right? So I thought that was point for surviving spouse, for being a mature person and going, it. As a side note, Your Honor, I would really like for a professional manager to be put in place, because none of the three of us know what the hell we're doing. So let's be real. Somebody else has got to,
of course.
get the most advantage out of these assets, right?
Absolutely.
Like I would think.
Absolutely.
But the kids were, as the young kids say these days, # not about that life. They are not in agreement. And especially, I think, the oldest child, Adria, was the most vocal. She's definitely the one, the sister is just kind of along for the ride, it seems. The older child is the one waging the war here. So she was absolutely.
How old? I didn't.
I think they were going in. That's a very good question. I mean, they weren't children.
But they weren't children.
They were absolutely not children.
So they were adults.
Absolutely not children. They were probably in their 40s, I would say. 30s or 40s.
Okay.
But yeah, I actually don't have their ages the way we do in some of the other episodes. But no, these are adults, right? These are adults that, but this is no genie bus, okay? This is no, I've been working in daddy's enterprise since I was 14. This is not
no
that.
one expected Tom Petty to die at 66.
Well, that's true.
Tom Petty.
That is true.
Tom Petty should have lived a much longer life. So.
Absolutely. I mean, that is true. That is true. He did not die. This was not a Casey Kasem of we got some dementia now and there's, a decline and no,
That's
man.
Exactly.
He left in style. He left in style with the cocktail that ended his life. So you're right. Absolutely nobody expected this. But this was the third iteration of that trust, right? So at least somebody was, hey, Tom, you got to do an amendment to the trust for XYZ reason. So at least there was something in place. But certainly, and not all of us have $100 million clients, right? But usually in the high net worth space, it is really important for these families, for certain people, regardless of where they're getting their wealth from, business, real estate, or you're a singer-songwriter, right? I mean, I am sure who Tom Petty hired are fantastic lawyers. They are not door law in the sense of they did a bankruptcy yesterday and today they're doing a divorce and tomorrow they're drafting your 80-page trust with significant tax complications in them, right? These are real professionals. And even then, you have to play psychic, you have to play Miss Cleo and make sure you dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And while you're over here worried about maybe a Q-tip trust and how to save millions of dollars in taxes, the real fight erupted in the paragraph about what's equal, right?
Which is very early in the document.
Which is right. Which was something that's probably been there forever, right? It's kind of just one of these things that maybe kept getting glossed over of like,
which is really
votes.
surprising.
Equal votes,
that
guys.
nobody caught that. It's really, it's actually mind-blowing that nobody saw that, because even a first-year lawyer would have spotted something so egregious.
I mean, it's true. But one of the other things, and in other podcasts we talk about with real family businesses, in those podcasts, like in the Lakers, like in the Jerry Buss estate, right? We talk actually quite a bit, and maybe it's worth talking about again, how your testamentary document, and honestly, if you have any level of wealth, especially we're in Florida, right? Like, it's going to be a trust. Like, if you're walking around with some simple will, God bless you. You're just looking for a problem, right? So if you have any real level of wealth, it's going to be a trust. So your testamentary document has to relate, has to correspond, and for the love of all that is holy, should not contradict your corporate documents, right? If you have a family business, and that is a big conversation we have with business owners that want to pass their business down to the next generation, these things must speak to each other. There is no getting around that, right? If your trust, and in this case, it wasn't a family business, it was just the lawyers thought it'd be a better way to manage the IP if the trustee opens an LLC and manages all the IP through there, and then we give the daughters whatever equal input of only that thing, and let's structure it that way, right? In theory, that seems like an interesting, good way to put it, but for sure, these things need to relate to each other. The trust needs to say something that makes sense. They need to align. They need to I always joke, they need to talk to each other. I would actually love it if this one mentions that one and vice versa. And then we always update everything together. Because your trust document is going to control ownership and how things change ownership when somebody dies. So your shares, right? But your corporate documents say who is in charge day to day. Your bylaws say who the is the president of the show, who the is the secretary, who's the VP, who's whatever, if it's an LLC, like in this case, who's the manager, right, of the LLC, of the membership. So these are different things. Like your hat as owner, as member, and your hat as manager are two different things. And we talk about that greatly when we talk about business succession on this podcast. But even here where it's not a real operating business, it was just a holding company for this asset, you're still running into the same problem. You're still running into, the trust doesn't discuss who the is going to be manager and what that voting, like who's on the board of this thing and who gets to vote. It just says everybody gets equal input. What does that mean? Like,
well, and they fail to understand that at the end of the day, it would be a judge who would adjudicate this, who would ultimately
after years of nonsense,
have to decide what this means.
Right.
And that's the worst outcome. You never want a third party, whether it's a judge or a lawyer, to have to adjudicate what the interpretation of this phrase means. You want it to be so abundantly clear that anybody, a 10-year-old could read this document and go, yeah, I get it. I know exactly what this means because it says it right there. And yet they failed to do that. So now they've left it in the hands of a judge who may or may not be intelligent, who may or may not
allegedly,
who may or may not care, who may or may not have one party or the other's best interests in mind. So now you've left it in the hands of a third party who
has to guess what your dad would have wanted or your husband would have wanted, right? On testimony. And then, surviving spouse is going to come up with 16 witnesses that all say one thing. And the children could come up with another 15 and a half that say something else, right? And here we are in like limbo land. And as we always say, Manny, what is my favorite thing? Factual litigation. Very expensive litigation.
This is extremely factual.
Expensive litigation.
Extremely factual litigation, which will mean a ton of...
Because there's no standard. It's what did Tom Petty mean?
What did he
What
intend?
did he want? What did he
intend?
Well, let's do a seance. Let's call Miss Cleo, and she can ask him, because fuck if any of us know, right? Like, and then the attorney...
I still don't know, because I got to tell you, I don't know what that language means. That's so imprecise that I have no idea what this means. So...
And I'll take this a step further. I think something else generally, like taking a step back from this case, but just thinking of our clients over the course of the years, right? A lot of times, either a client comes in and goes, yeah, I want to leave everything a third, right? And this is another conversation you have with family business owners, because we're not splitting the company in a third. Maybe you have a genie bus working in the company, and then you got the 6 others not working in the company, or whatever it is, right? We got to have a very practical conversation about what that means. And it is definitely up to the attorney to like challenge the client and go, hey, we got to think this through. That doesn't make sense. Like when everybody loves to come in here and they got 2 kids, right? The quintessential family. I got 2 kids. Oh, who's going to be your successor trustee when you die? Oh, both kids together. No. Like I immediately go, no, that is a bad fucking idea. Why is that a bad idea? Well, who's the tiebreaker? Are we now having a committee of trustees? Like, which one of these 2 is more aligned with your values? Which one is more organized? Which one could speak to a lawyer? There's certain factors that I go through in my mind, right?
Absolutely.
But you as the advisor have to kind of like, hey, client, that's not how this shit works. And sometimes even when they're like, yeah, I want to split everything a third, because that's fair. Let me tell you, fair is up to interpretation, my friend. And when you have certain people working in a business and other people not working in a business, hey, do we have other assets that we can give this guy to make him happy and then leave the business to this guy? Whatever it is, right? Like, it depends very much on the family. What are the assets inside? What are the total wealth? There's a lot of, but that's what you're paying for, people. This is the difference between door lawyer, and this is somebody I've always said, I generally bash other lawyers on this podcast that think that they are going to practice in multiple areas, because this area of the law has nuance. It is what it has.
Well, it's very
case
very
law
precise.
specific.
It's very precise.
It is very case law specific,
Very precise.
number one. I mean, if you're looking at like the pure, either the asset protection or certain things, then we have federal issues if you have tax issues. Of course, rich people have in different states, sometimes overseas. And if you think that you did a divorce yesterday and tomorrow you're drafting an 80-page trust, I got something coming for you, right? And so much more so, I know I'm pretty harsh about this, but it is a very nuanced area, and you need to know the next question to ask your client. And you need to challenge your client into not doing stupid shit like this. Because that's what this sounds like to me, honestly. When I read this, I go, oh, somebody asked Tom Petty how he wanted control, and he said equally to everybody, and he thinks he's being, a good guy.
And they
He's being
agree,
fair.
and they just dropped that into the language.
And they just said, great,
Let's go.
right? And because
and no one questioned that.
No one challenged it.
No
I
one
don't think anyone
challenged
challenged
it.
it.
No one looked at it and said, this makes no sense.
that won't work.
This
this
makes
won't
no
work.
sense.
The way it's written won't work. And what do you really mean by that? And then you know what? Even if he would have said, oh, what I really mean is this one. How about the next question? Has that person ever managed a catalog portfolio of intellectual property? Because maybe that's not the person. You know what I mean? I don't want to turn this into an Elvis thing where apparently all of his whatever managers him over and stole I don't know what. I haven't seen the HBO movie. But the point is, who can we hire to do this? And maybe that's the we put in place, right? Not your youngest daughter that wants to go dance on the tickety-tock. I don't know what any of these people are doing. No, they're 40. They're not dancing. We're not on the tickety-tock. We're too old for that. But whatever it is, right? All these kids, they grew up with money. I'm sure they have their own things that they're doing. And maybe they're not the best ones to be doing this job, So the questions
managing a
need to be asked.
portfolio of royalties is.
I don't know how to manage a portfolio. I don't have the
not
contacts. I don't have the.
Is not a simple or non-complex job. That is a highly, in this society, Michael Jackson's future catalog portfolio could be worth $1 billion.
Well, doesn't he own like the Beatles? Have the Beatles
owns part of
songs
the
or whatever?
owns part of the Beatles catalog, and so his future.
And that's worth $1 gazillion.
He was essentially broke when he died.
Yeah.
He was broke when he died, but his future portfolio was perhaps $1 billion.
And that is exactly, so we do talk about Michael Jackson on this podcast, and we split that into several episodes because there was the actual, let's say, succession, but then there's a whole conversation about the litigation with the IRS, right? Because the estate said, we're f***ing broke. We got lawsuits coming out of our ears of all these people saying, they were molested or whatever, I don't even know, and allegedly all of this, right? But the IRS said, like, the assets are worth $1 gazillion, you assholes, because not only is it Michael Jackson's, but the Beatles and the whatever. And so if you take, and now we're talking about, bring that to present value, baby. What is it, what is the future worth of the present? And like the IRS wanted to say, you guys owe us a ton of taxes is what you owe us.
Michael Jackson is making more money now.
Of course. Everybody forgets.
And yet he died, I don't know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Michael Jackson is making more money now than he ever made in life.
Well, certainly the last however amount of years of his life was certainly, tainted by all of that kind of controversy and lawsuits and all sorts of shit, which they say he was in a great amount of debt, right?
He was.
He was in a great amount of debt.
He
by the
was
time
because
died,
he spent more money yearly than he made.
Right. And so, but it was absolutely the IRS's position that we don't give a fuck. Like, are you kidding me? Like the amount of money that's going to be made. But I mean, the court ultimately, and there's a whole podcast on this. You can't IRS start saying, well, there will be $250 billion in the future. We do need a present value, and so that's its own episode. Go check that out. But back to Mr. Tom Petty, I do think this was uninteresting because it seems so simple, but yet it's not.
Highly.
But yet it's not. And it's that interplay between the trust says X, but now we have a corporate aspect of just because you're the owner doesn't mean you're the manager. And the way I explain this to some clients when they kind of look at me, I don't know why people get a little bit tripped up with this. I really don't. But it's interesting because I like to tell them, hey, just because you own 3 stocks of Disney doesn't mean you get to go sit at the board meeting with, who's the CEO now? Is it back to Bob?
Bob Iger.
Is it back to Bob? Yeah,
Iger.
I can't keep track. But I think it's back to Bob,
Is
right?
it Bob?
So I think it is Bob.
It's Bob.
It's back to Bob. You don't get to go sit at the board meeting, hang out with Bob, right? You're just a shareholder. Sit and wait for your distribution or sell your goddamn shares, right? And that's what makes generally clients go, oh, got it, got it. Except that in closely held businesses, what happens? Florida statutes, and I'm sure every statute in every state, gives every owner a certain amount of power, right? And anybody could sue anybody, right? So even if we would have made the daughters passive shareholders, so to speak, I mean, what does it cost to initiate a lawsuit? Whatever it is, $500, whatever,
Filing fee.
whatever the the filing
fee
is, right? Anybody could sue anybody, as we very well know. Anybody could sue anybody, and we're off to the races, right? And then you got to get yourself out of that lawsuit in whatever mechanism you can. And Manny, I swear, out of all the lawyers, you must have like the best rate of getting things dismissed on a motion to dismiss that I've ever seen. Like I tell every single client, it'll never get dismissed on a motion. It's just not, right? It's not going anywhere. Like it's too easy for a judge just to be like, nope, this is rolling. We're rolling forward. And somehow you get dismissed. I really don't know how. I swear to you. I swear to you. But you have really good luck with that, Manny. That's like your thing.
I think it's a bit of
it's not just luck. It's not just luck. You are very particular and you understand like the elements of causes of action very well. And you dig into those. And you're an excellent writer, right? I've always told you this. You're an excellent writer because you put a lot of emotion into what isn't generally an emotional writing style. When you're drafting a complaint or whatever it is. This is not a fucking soap opera. But you read it, and Manny acts like it's a soap opera. Like, Manny's a frustrated fiction writer that became a lawyer or something. I don't know. It's entertaining.
Do I have a second career as Stephen King?
Wow, you would have made more money that way, Manny.
Yeah,
I don't know what to tell you.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you went the
I
wrong
know.
direction, babe.
I know, yeah.
You went the wrong direction.
I think I did.
We all did.
I think I did. Yeah. This was a career misstep.
You could have been a crime writer or something. No, like I don't know. What would you? What type of like fiction books do you like to read? Because I've always said this.
I don't read a lot of fiction.
I've always said this. Like
I read a lot of nonfiction.
Yeah, me too. Me too. But I feel like I also write that way, right? Like,
I like science fiction.
And
I like science fiction. I would have been a science fiction writer. Oh, absolutely. I'm currently watching. I don't know, for all you guys out there, I'm currently watching something called Silo
what is that?
on Apple, which they're going to get to in the third and fourth season. And
We don't know what caused the end of.
Not yet,
the world
because I haven't read the novels. There's 3 novels, and
It's from books.
I haven't read the novels.
Okay.
And apparently mankind goes into silos.
Like
Into
silos, like
deep silos.
underground,
Underground
like we build a
silos
community
that
down
go
here.
200 stories down.
Okay.
And it's fascinating.
Because the world is polluted, or
Because the world is
there's,
polluted.
like, nuclear toxic.
Something
Chernobyl
along
happened.
Yeah, but they haven't
again?
they haven't explained that yet, and
Okay.
I haven't read the novel, so I don't know what the explanation is. So I've been.
Oh, so do you like these like dystopian?
I do. I love.
Like, are you-
I
like
love,
1984 in high school, you were,
I
like,
love.
loving-
I don't know why my mind works at this.
Oh, because you're such a fucking cynic about
this
everything. So that, what do you mean? It's
There
so
you go.
And man, if you know Manny for
there-
like 10 minutes,
there you go.
This makes perfect sense. Guys.
And so the dystopian aspect to Silo is
well, and I
is
guess the
incredibly
realization that
fascinating.
we're 3 moves from actually that any of this
Whoa.
occurring. You know, like,
You want to talk foreign policy?
I mean, no.
wanna
I'm
talk
not
with
trying to be political
Vladimir
at
Putin?
all.
With Vladimir
I'm just
Putin?
saying human nature. You know, I think when you're a kid and you read, you know, what are one of the first whatever books? I don't remember, middle school or something, where you read 1984 or some shit, and you're like,
Orwell's-
oh, this is crazy, right? Like, right. You know,
Not so cra-
Fahrenheit, whatever,
not so
whatever.
crazy.
And you're like, yeah, and then you grow up and you're like, oh, holy. Nobody knows what's actually going on. Like, you think your parents know everything. You think adults are actually in control of things and everything makes sense
they're
when you're a
not.
kid, right? You think that you just don't understand it. No. And then you become an adult and you realize we're all f***ed. Like, nobody knows shit. We're all figuring it out. And this whole world is 3 steps from, like, nuclear war, right? Like, it's just f***ing crazy. That is one of those moments as a young
Well,
adult. You're like, oh, shit, man.
I think what you ultimately get to is and this is way off topic, but
This is what you and I always do
wait.
at Hillstone. Like,
control is an illusion. It's a figment of everyone's imagination that we ultimately have control over our destiny and over our surroundings. And if any of this is instructive, is that we have no control.
well, we just got very philosophical here
have no
on
control.
Fun with Death and Taxes, people. Fun with Death and Taxes.
Okay.
But this is what we default into all the time anyway. Like, if you catch us at any bar on a Friday, what are we generally talking about?
Cheers.
Salud.
Cheers.
What are we talking about? Usually some socioeconomic shit show happening somewhere that, you know, we're dissecting. And what do we end up with? What is the conclusion? Oh, we're all and none of us have any control of anything. All right.
Control is an illusion. It's an illusion. So I think everyone needs to understand that you have control over an 80-page trust. You have control over Tom Petty's trust, and Tom Petty ultimately did mismanage that trust. That is something we have control over, and he did mismanage.
Well, I would say the first mistake, honestly, not just because, yes, you need precise drafting and you need to be clear and you need to kind of run, as the attorney, you need to run scenarios in your mind to go, what would happen in the real world when this is when we put this in place, right? And you kind of have to think through that. And again, challenge your fucking client to get past their bullshit, because everybody's like, I just want it to go equally. I want it to be fair. Oh man, I don't see clients anymore day to day. I don't manage clients' matters day to day. But if I had $1 for when I did, every single person that told me, and if it wasn't for me asking the next question, right, going, wait a minute, especially in blended families, man, do people have this utopian idea of like, no, everybody gets along. But I would say the biggest issue with the planning for blended families is you are the glue. You are the glue, Tom, holding that family together. And you are underestimating what's going to happen when the glue is no longer there. You see, because it's like probate, estate litigation is nothing but family law remix. Is nothing but you got pony and I didn't get the pony, and why do you get whatever? And in this case, surviving spouse, why are you mooching off my dad? He's been my dad for 40 years. You've been married to him doing nothing for 10. That's what the kids usually say when we represent the kids. And God forbid, Tom didn't, die like Robin Williams or like Casey Kasem, where everybody's like, you shipped them off to like, the nursing home or something. So why the do you get anything? There's just so much resentment that gets regurgitated that just explodes. It will absolutely just explode, and it will manifest itself in litigation.
And the fact that in life, attorneys, advisors, consultants were not able to articulate this and highlight this to their client, to me, is exasperating, because this is human nature, and it should be fundamental. It should be basic. It should be self-evident that these controversies will inevitably occur. And it should not be surprising that a 10-year spouse and 40-year, 30-year children might not get along at the end of the day. It should not be surprising, but yet we are in our profession reminded again and again and again. This is a problem. It's
at our level, let me tell you something that's, I think, even more interesting, because I'm also very honest in this podcast about, I guess, the public's expectations of what your lawyer is going to do. Obviously, when you look at this 80-page trust, I'm going, shit costs $50,000, right? Like this. At least. This took a lot. When you look at this trust,
50 and more.
Forget this. This clause. There's a lot of tax planning in there. There's a lot of other planning in there. There were 3 iterations of it at a minimum. It was amended and restated, right? And so there's a lot of consulting that happens between you and your client and getting to know the family and whatever. If you think, general public, and I love you all dearly, that if you go to an attorney and you pay them some silly $5,000, that they're going to sit here and counsel you on all your family dynamics and all of your bullshit and your kids, whatever, and go through very specific you are wrong. You are absolutely, and I'm just telling you the fucking truth. And I'll tell you, this happened to me last week. I have a friend of mine who's a CPA. He invites me to one of these holiday things, right? He introduces me to some business owner who has, I think, like, they're not I guess they're like generators, but like commercial for like hospitals and whatever. The guy has a $30 million business, right? We start talking, and he actually brings it up. And he actually says to me, like, oh, you're an estate planner? Let me ask you something, because, like, I just did my estate plan, and honestly, he's kind of young. I will give whoever this attorney is, that I will not name, a way out, in the sense that if you didn't know the nature of his business or the nature of his wealth, and all you really got to know him, like, he's like 39. I mean, he's relatively young to be so successful, right? In the sense that he has built this business. He didn't come from money. But his question to me was actually like, hey, I just did my estate plan a couple months ago. My financial advisor, and I'll talk shit about you guys in a second, financial advisors, referred me to this lawyer, and, but my biggest concern was like, I have a stay-at-home wife. I got 3 little kids under the age of 6, by the way. And he's like, I went because I wanted to talk about the business and like, what's going to happen to my business like when I die? And, we had one meeting and then, we said everything's going to my wife and my kids. Great. Okay. And then we had another meeting and I signed a bunch of shit. And now I have, this binder and like, but now that I'm thinking about it, we didn't really talk a lot about my business, The first question out of my mouth, Manny, because I was like, okay, so there was only a couple meetings, got it. And I was like, look, let me be very clear. Before I set wrong expectations for me, right? How much did you pay for this? And when he said $5,000, I said, oh, that's exactly why.
$5,000.
If all you paid is $5,000, guys,
$5,000.
what you're getting is what you're getting. You know what I mean? Do not expect, now, I will say this.
Wow.
Financial advisor. If you got a client with a $30 million business, aside from the rest of his wealth, and who you're referring to him is an attorney whose trust, it's on her website. I'm not just talking trash. Trust planning is somewhere between $3,500 and $5,500. That's not the fucking lawyer for your $30 million client. That's just ludicrous. Like, that's silly. That's stupid. I'm sorry, guys. You get what you pay for. And I'm not saying that, what he's holding in his hand is total trash. I'm saying it's a start.
Pretty close.
It's a start. It's something.
It's pretty close.
It's something,
It's pretty close.
It's your will substitute. A will is, hey, judge, this is what I want to happen. I want it to go to my 3 kids and my wife. Well, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. That's what fucking Florida law says already. You know what I mean? It's one of these that's like, you got to, and I will blame the financial advisor here, because it very much seemed like sometimes these guys are just looking for a commodity. They're looking for, I just need a lawyer to put this in place, right, for my client. And that's not the case, guys. To get to know a client, especially if they have an operating business. Tom Petty had a holding company. That's actually much simpler to structure, like a business succession plan, of a real operating day-to-day
because
company.
it's not a day-to-day operating business.
Right. What's going to happen when the $30 million critical power guy dies and now all the accounts are frozen? Who's running payroll? Tell me. How the are we getting to run payroll for these employees? Oh, just kidding. Let's wait for 18 months till we and distribute the business to the spouse, who also doesn't know shit about anything about the business. Admittedly is exactly what he told me, right? So these kind of things, we must be honest with ourselves in that there are mistakes made even when you got the rock stars of estate planning lawyers working on Tom Petty's estate. It was overlooked. The language wasn't as precise as it should have been. Honestly, in my opinion, that company should have been set up from the get before he died. And maybe that was the plan. He just died unexpectedly, right? But I don't like leaving instructions to trustees to do what I want them to do. If it's corporate related, I want to draft the corporate documents as the estate planning lawyer to make sure that what I'm intending in that trust is what was already created. What's it going to cost you? The yearly corporate fee? Who gives a shit, right?
Absolutely.
That is stupid is what
Absolutely.
It is to not set it up front, in my
Absolutely.
opinion. But you have rock stars, and I'm sure these are rock star lawyers, and even this is overlooked. You think you went to Little Miss whatever that does divorce, bankruptcy, foreclosure, real estate closings, and by the way, she's really a real estate lawyer that drafted this guy's trust, that now, since the real estate market has tanked, decided that she does estate planning. You know what I mean? And when I asked him, what made you think that this was a good idea? He said, I saw her videos on TikTok. Oh, that's adorable, guys. Maybe if your lawyer has a lot of time to do videos on TikTok, they're not reading case law. I don't know. I'm very jaded. I've become an old grumpy, I really have. I've become an old grumpy lawyer of really, is this what it's come to, But I digress. So there must be some real conversations about Tom Petty lawyers. We can bash you because you were paid a ton of money to draft this. You know what? Little Susie that was paid $5,000 and had to go dance on TikTok, you got what you paid for, buddy. I'm sorry. I don't feel bad for you and I do feel bad for you. I told him, maybe you should get a consult with my office and book a strategy session and talk to one of my attorneys, because I promise you your business has not been planned for $5,000, right? That's just a little anecdote there. I, continuously bash door lawyers on this podcast. Some people tell me I should bash ChatGPT or LegalZoom. And honestly, that's just a whole different conversation that I don't really entertain. That's, I think if you go on LegalZoom, you already know you're getting what you paid for. It's much more dangerous for you to go to a lawyer and think that they actually know what they're doing because they have a law degree, where in law school you were never taught how to do any of this shit, right? Like, I mean, truly, law is an apprenticeship. It really fucking is. And you need to go to people that have the experience in what you're looking for, because the laws in this country are all very complicated. Like, okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox. I really am going to get off my soapbox.
They are extremely complicated.
As somebody that we both did. We both had careers before being lawyers. And the way that I thought about this profession when I wasn't a lawyer, and then how I saw that it actually works and what you actually learn in law school, which is just how to think. All you learn in law school is how to hopefully, process something, think through a problem, strategize through it, issue spot, and then research, and then go figure it the fuck out, and then take a goddamn position, because everything is a position. Everything in our area, even outside of litigation, but certainly litigation, is a strategy and a fucking position. And so when people, like, for example, I got a call the other day, when people are angry at their attorney in litigation, and I get referred them, right? And I go and I review, we pull the docket and whatever. And honestly, my advice to this guy was keep your lawyer. Keep your lawyer. And we both know who this is. In a certain case that is famous, remember I said I wanted to put his picture up in the lobby? That guy was the lawyer in this case. But I looked at everything that was going on, and the client absolutely had unreasonable expectations. Absolutely did. And he kept going, well, what would you do here? And what will you do there? And can you please do? And I'll pay you to write me a memo. And I was like, look, babe, what I would do here is actually fucking irrelevant, because there is 13 different ways you could go about this. And I know who your lawyer is, and he's a fucking good lawyer. And as of right now, he hasn't done anything that I wouldn't have done. I think he's actually proceeded the perfect way. Maybe not the way, maybe he hasn't communicated that exactly to you in the way you would have wanted. This is obviously a little bit of an anxious person. Maybe he's a little bit high maintenance, right? But all that really matters is, because I could write you a great memo about my strategy. Who the fuck cares about my strategy? I'm not the asshole in the case. Right? So is his strategy worse than is mine better? Absolutely not. Because he might have another long game in his mind that I don't, because I'm not privy to the conversations he's had with the fucking opposing counsel. I'm not privy to what the fuck he's seen in discovery, right? Like, I can't see any of that from the docket. So strategy is everything. In litigation, strategy is everything.
It's an art.
It's an art.
It's an art.
It's an
I've
absolute,
always said it's an art.
An art.
It's not a science. It's an art. And it's an ability to work your way through problems artfully.
Yeah. And unfortunately, clients, all of you do not have unlimited funds to go to town in litigation the way that a lot of times a lawyer wants to, right? Like, we have to be very cognizant of this. You may or may not be, we've had $100,000 a month clients, right? We've absolutely had those where, like, this case takes over. And this, and opposing counsel is at Big Law. And they got 13 lawyers working on this case. And therefore, everybody's got to work on this case too. And then there are clients that are like, oh my God, this is a $10,000 bill. I can't get this every month, guys. I cannot sustain that level of litigation. So we're also working within the confines of what the client can bear. In the Tom Petty estate, I'm sure for 2 years, oh my God, did you read some of these like press releases? Because these were really fun. Reading this shit show was quite entertaining, right? I think you and I, our style of litigation is a little more intellectual, but like, I have several other lawyers in here that did nothing but like make fun of the trash talking that everybody was doing, because that's kind of what they like, But like the oldest daughter was like, and I quote, because the surviving spouse apparently had said something about like, look, this girl really doesn't have the temperament to be managing shit. Like, let's be very clear, this is an emotional person, and she really shouldn't be managing or controlling or making decisions about anything. And her response was, and this is all over, different social media periodicals, etc. What I don't have the temperament for is having my entire life raped, being disparaged, my dad being disgraced, and being surrounded by idiot, selfish, unreliable people who are drug addicts. So she's apparently calling surviving spouse a drug addict and whatever, right? So I mean, it's this kind of like trash that's going back and forth that, Jesus, you know, this is just a lot of animosity, and that fuels a lot of very expensive litigation.
That is extreme.
Very
That's
expensive.
mostly what fuels litigation, is the extreme animosity that these folks possess for each other.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And 2 years of this kind of litigation costs a lot of money.
Oh, a ton of money.
A lot.
Emotion drives so much of this, unfortunately.
Right. And then, of course, surviving spouse's attorney makes a statement and, you know, says that, you know, this one's batshit crazy, as evidenced by all the things that she says, right? And he says, and I quote, "This misguided and meritless lawsuit demonstrates why Tom Petty designated his wife to be sole trustee and to be the only one with authority to manage his estate. Dana will not allow this nonsense to distract her from protecting her husband's legacy." I love the word nonsense because that's my word. Like, that is literally my word. Anybody that knows me, that's how I describe most bullshit that happens. Like, this is just nonsense. And so here we go. We have attorneys making comments in the public record, you know, trying to sway whatever, because ultimately it's going to come down to the judge and what he thinks was Tom Petty's intent. And so there's multiple layers to this litigation, because actually the initial complaint and petition that was filed and what have you, then there were other iterations of it. And this kind of sounded like a derivative action, Manny, although it was not, that's not the way it was phrased. But when the daughters, on behalf of the LLC, sued surviving spouse saying, hey, she has set up a different entity. Like, the trust says set up an artistic entity to manage whatever, right? And initially what was set up was Petty Unlimited LLC, right? But then all of a sudden the daughters find out that there's Tom Petty Legacy
Well,
LLC.
It's a breach of fiduciary
Right?
duty.
And they go, fuck that bitch. She is diverting our assets over there, right? Like, and of course Dana's going, Nick, you don't know what I've put in each one. Calm your shit. We're not there yet. Like, the lawyers are still going back and forth and they're negotiating the operating agreements and da-da-da-da-da-da. And this is taking so long that I just set up this other one so we can, you know, expedite some of this, because we're going to lose out on deals, right? Like, if we're sitting here in month 18 arguing about a clause in the fucking operating agreement of the first one, and so we can't get any kind of, you know, consensus about anything, well then there goes our $5 million when we license whatever over there, right? So Dana had a reason, and Dana actually did admit one way or the other what was being owned by each one in this initial petition, right? But it sounds like a derivative action on behalf of the LLC going, she fucked my entity. I mean, I happen to be one of the people that may or may not vote in this entity, but she is screwing us over by starting another one and transferring assets over there. So that's its own fun litigation.
Well, that's a breach of fiduciary duty, and that's a very serious allegation against the trustee.
And
very
each of them,
serious.
they want the same relief, right? Which is remove this bitch from my life. Like, remove her out of the trust, out of the LLC. I don't ever want to see her face. You know what I mean? Read between the lines. That's what they're looking for, which is not really a remedy here. I mean, there may be set off, right? There may be certain things to equalize. Ooh, there's that word again. To equalize some bad acts or maybe something that has happened or waste that's been committed in the estate.
Well, that's what they're essentially alleging is waste.
Yeah.
Is that Dana has probably committed some waste and some fraud.
Yeah.
And
I
so
mean,
she's being sued for
I
breach.
mean, but to Dana's, I believe in somewhere in that 335-page petition, there are plenty of things where Dana's like, we're arguing about the fucking artwork on the cover, guys. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she, even when she's And apparently there was some, like, everybody was in agreement with it, and then the oldest daughter turns around and says, no, fuck you, I'm no longer in agreement with it. And so now we don't even, like, this is not feasible. We cannot run a business this way. This is just disruptive. Like, this is not, she's committing waste by not letting us take advantage of the assets that we have, that we could be making money off of, right? Which is also fair, hashtag fair, or like... Manny's not convinced.
I don't
Manny,
know.
You are so biased.
I don't know.
You are so biased.
I think that
He's
my,
like,
my history.
Judge Martinez, what say you?
My history is that new spouses eventually.
Why are we so jaded, Manny?
New spouses, unfortunately, are not favorably predisposed to prior children.
Oh, well, I mean that could be true. That could be true. But do we believe new spouses are generally going to try to fuck over the children?
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
He said yes.
Yeah,
you heard it here first, guys.
I do. I think new spouses always fuck over the old children.
Interesting.
Always.
Well,
100. These are not their chromosomal, biological dependents.
Sure.
And I think generally there's not much love lost between the original children and the secondary or subsequent spouses.
okay.
So. And I've seen this movie and this play.
He's
and this
like,
act.
I've seen this movie before.
It's played out 1,000 times, and it will continue to get played out. Rich male remarries,
Yeah.
and inevitably you always have a war between the original children and the subsequent succeeding spouses.
Sure. I mean, but our standard here is intent, right? Like, what did Tom Petty intend?
Nobody knows because he screwed up the language.
And nobody knows because they
screwed
up the language.
He screwed up
well,
the language.
I actually, this settled out of court, right? So we don't actually have a judge's as we
Right. So
most
we
of
have
the
no
time,
idea how this settled.
do
I
not.
assume it settled probably equitably.
I'm assuming, somebody like the great honorable curator Manuel Rodriguez was put in place to fucking manage this bullshit. Like, they all came to an agreement, because they're never going to agree. Like, you can't settle and just say we're going back to
I'm sure
what we were doing before, which is
right.
oldest daughter hates the artwork and I love the artwork and so therefore we can't do shit. Like, we need a mediator here. And maybe they all agreed on maybe not Larry. They agreed on somebody else.
Sure,
Or who the fuck
sure.
knows? Or people are running out of
Probably.
money, so they became
And
much more reasonable.
if-
I don't know.
And if new spouse or subsequent spouse agreed to this, it's because she got a very nice settlement to play.
I'm
along.
sorry. Surviving spouse here was actually the sole trustee of the trust. So I would imagine, in the words of Manny Rodriguez, she had the bigger dick, guys.
An arbitrary title.
Oh, wow.
An arbitrary title imposed over the biological children.
Okay, counselor. I think it says a lot about Mr. Petty's intent when he made surviving spouse trustee.
Well, that's his.
I
That's his squeeze. That's who he's
Well-
sleeping. That's who he's sleeping with.
And yes, absolutely. He is. Amongst all the other groupies, I imagine. I don't. Allegedly, don't come for me. I don't need a fucking lawsuit against me from the estate,
So-
disparaging his good name. I still think. I think it's very indicative when you make someone trustee. I think that's and how that came about. Right? Maybe we would
I
depose
don't.
the attorneys.
I think it's easy. I think.
What do you think? This is an Anna Nicole Smith problem? Like, you can't touch my tits if you don't leave.
Sure.
Oh,
I think all these old guys. I think they all appoint their new squeeze. They're and the original children always try to get squeezed out.
Wow. I found
I do.
someone that's as biased as I am in the opposite direction.
I do.
I
I think the new.
So wait.
I think new spouses.
Wait. Because now this becomes very. I think if I was aside from my bias, which I clearly have, right? And that you clearly have.
And I have,
I
yeah.
actually think there is one line in this trust, in that same section, where it talks about opening, and that section's a little bit of a mess, because it's trying to do succession and that management component in the same place, in the sense that, like, oh, if surviving spouse is dead, then the 1/3, 2/3, and it gets a little bit convoluted. But where I think that the children win, honestly, where the surviving spouse wins is because of this last line. And I'll read you the entire little clause. With respect to the creation of the artistic property entity that is to be created by the trustee, which is going to be whatever, unlimited, right? The trustee is directed to create the governing documents. I believe this is where they went wrong. I believe that should have been created in life, of the entity, such that the spouse, Anne, Adria, and Kim, because it's like Anna Kim, whatever her name is, and in this trust it's just Kim, who are living at the time of creation, shall be entitled to participate equally in the management of the property entity. Here's where I think it turns. Even though their respective economic interests in the entity are not equal. And the reason I say this is because it is a well-known, I guess, if this would have been a corporation, you cannot say, oh, you're 1/3 owner, but you only get 20% distribution, right? That kind of flexibility comes in partnerships, LLCs, etc. So when you start drafting things like economic interests versus management, in another part of this, in the clauses before this, it talks about how it's going to be split equally. Like the distribution will absolutely be equal, right? So if it was not equal, if now management wasn't going to be equal, there's no need for this line. Even though their respective economic interests are going to be equal, management here is not. And that's what they're alluding to. They don't say it, but adding that line basically says, hey, it's a third as far as every dollar that gets distributed, right? And we've already established that in other clauses. But the economic interests are one thing. The management is going to be equal. I think that really shows that management being equal is you two on this side and you on this side, and that's why it's equal. It's 50-50, which is also its own show. But that's a very nuanced. If you're not an estate planning lawyer, if you're not a tax person, if you are not a very sophisticated corporate lawyer, you would never go there. I mean, little Susie Dorlaw has no fucking idea in the difference between economic interest or management interest and an LLC, because she filed a divorce yesterday. Like, that's what most of her time is spent on. Like, that is a very nuanced corporate line that these guys were too big for their britches. Like, they were too sophisticated and figured, I mean, it's not that they figured they're right? Whoever does the administration of this trust is not going to be pajarito lawyer either, and they're going to know what that means. But do you think that attorneys for the kids can't turn that around and say, you and your economic interest? I don't give a what that says. That could say many things. That means something to the CPAs. That means something to the corporate lawyers. And you know what? It means something different for the trust lawyers. So I do believe that, because this is a sophisticated way to put what I believe the intent was, right? Honestly, you got to depose this lawyer. Like, you got to depose the guy that wrote this. And hopefully he's not going to turn around and say, this is just privilege, bro. I'm not saying about like, and then fight about that, right? But that's neither here nor there, because this settled, right? We don't actually know, and we're not privy to the discovery. And deposing lawyers is a interesting. Notwithstanding that opposing counsels try to depose me all the time in one of our cases because he's a. But when I read this, I was like, there it is, guys. In the 80 pages, there it is what the real intent was. But if you're not at that level of really understanding tax, corporate, and the interplay amongst trust, estate planning, tax, and then corporate law, that you gloss over that. You gloss over that and go, nah, that means nothing to me. And it doesn't. Guess what? To Adria and to Kim, it means nothing to them. And to the lawyer, their lawyer means nothing because it's not in his, it's not worth his while for it to mean anything. He's taking the absolute opposite position. So I thought that's where it turns. If I was Judge Marenco, I mean, if I was Judge Marenco, I'd put a curator in place. I go, none of the three of you know what the you're talking about. And if you're going to fight for 6 months about the artwork, we got a problem, right? Like, we got a problem. But then you and I have talked about this. You once told me you'd put my face on the salad dressing just like Mr. Newman to make money if you were the trustee of a trust, right? Because ultimately, what good are the assets if you can't, do something with them? Some people are very offended by things like that, like, oh, Tom Petty would have never, sold out that way, whatever. That is up to each in their own. And they did fight about that here too, by the way. That's a whole different, let's say, a whole different lawsuit that was launched years later about do we put, not on salad dressing, but do we use his image for things that are that retail and potentially selling out, right? Like potentially selling out to something he would have never done. But as you can see, guys, this is all very, even the word equal is something that it is complex. It can be complex.
Only complex because it wasn't defined.
Because it wasn't, you're absolutely right.
That's all. That's the only real meaning here is that the lawyers failed
to put one clause.
No, they failed in their precision. This was imprecise language that led to $1 million fight. That's all that happened here, and it's a cautionary tale about simple English and reading contracts at their face value. And that's all. I think this is a very, very simple cautionary tale about lawyers that spent $1 million yet failed to be precise. So,
and there you have it, people.
That's it.
I think that's all for today. I mean, we've gone over some big lessons in this estate, and we don't know what the outcome is. But clearly, if it was Judge Marenco, surviving spouse wins, and the voting rights are 50-50, with honestly none of them having power, because I guess Mr. Larry or Mr. Curator or whoever would have been the one managing this freaking LLC from then on. If it was Judge Rodriguez, it sounds like the kids got a 2/3 vote, and surviving spouse ain't gonna do shit.
I think the kids clearly had a 2/3 vote.
He's like, clearly, it's obvious. Okay. But this has been Having Fun with Death and Taxes. And remember, whether you are a super wealthy rock star or not, you must plan ahead with an actual lawyer that knows what they're doing to protect yourself, your family, and your assets. Don't forget to follow us. I believe we're everywhere, even potentially on the Tickety Talk. I'm not sure. And we will see you next time on another episode of Having Fun with Death and Taxes.